Now let's start the today's session. So today's session, like we are going to do the basic automation. So here, in order to do the automation, like we are going to use the tool called as an Selenium. So with the help of the Selenium, we are going to interact with the web page. Okay, so which is nothing but like with the help of the Selenium, we are going to interact with the web page. So that is what I told. So Selenium is nothing but it's an web page automation tool. So what kind of interaction like we are going to do? So let me just open any of the sample web page. So initially for basic stuff, I will use this learnmore.salesforce.com and post that I will fix one URL so we can use that one particular web page for testing. Okay, so let's say this is a Salesforce application. Like here we are having something called as an username text box, and we are having the password text box, and we are having the login button. So what I'm going to do, I need to enter the username, I need to enter the password, and then like I need to click on the login button. So which means like how we are going to do this action in the sense with the help of the Selenium. So rather than injecting with the help of the keyboard and the mouses, like we are going to use the script, and with the help of the script, like we are going to inject the input. So how the script knows where to inject the appropriate input in the sense, so generally we call this as a front end. Okay, so the application has two end, so one we call it as an front end and other we call it as an, okay, back end. So the front end is nothing but we call it as an UI. So user interface. So user interface in the sense like whatever it is displaying in the screen, we call it as an UI. So this is the Salesforce UI. So which contains logo, which contains text box, which contains the button, which contains checkbox, which contain hyperlinks, and then it contains few text, and also here it contains another button called as an start my free trial. So whatever the things which is available in your screen, we call it as an UI. So UI is nothing but it's called as an user interface. Now how we are going to interact with the user interface in the sense by accessing the backend data. So the backend structure we technically called as an a DOM. So how we call the front end as a UI. So the backend we call it as a DOM. So DOM means we call it as an document object model. Okay, so we call it as an document object model. So generally this document object model backend is configured in the HTML coding. So it will be available in the HTML code, or we can say it as an HTML structure. And how we are going to open this DOM structure in the sense, because like we are able to see the front end in similar way, like we should access the back end as well, so that like we can understand the coding and we can find the respective coding map to this particular username text box or password text box. By accessing the backend coding, like we can inject the appropriate values in the respective text box. Okay, so like here we are going to access the HTML coding, and how we are going to open this HTML coding in the sense like in our system, like we should tap use the button called as an F12. So in a Chrome, okay, so whatever the browser you are using, so like if you just click on F12, so what happened, like it will open the backend DOM structure. So initially, like whenever you are opening for the first time, so the default Docker view will be available in this structure. It will be available in right side. But for our user comfortability, what you can do, you can just click on this three dots and you can change the Docker side to the bottom. Okay, so you can just make the Docker to the bottom so that like we can easily relate the things. So now this is the front end, we call it as an UI, and this is the back end, so we call it as an DOM structure, and in which like they have written many things like which is in a HTML code. So everything is written in the form of an HTML code. So how we can find the mapping of the respective field in the sense, so if you need to find the backend coding of this particular username text box, you can just click on the text box and you can right click, and there is an option called as an inspect. So if you click on the inspect, so it will automatically highlight the backend coding in the DOM structure. You could see, so something is highlighting here. So if I place my mouse over here, so it is highlighting the particular field in the UI as well. So from which like we can conclude, okay, for this particular username text box, so this is the piece of code which is mapped at the backend DOM structure. So how we did it in a sense, so like initially we have opened this DOM structure with the help of an F12 button, and then like we have inspect the respective field. Okay, so we can inspect the field, or rather than pressing this F12 button, so also you can directly right click and inspect this field. It will open the backend DOM structure. So we can generally we can right click and inspect the backend DOM structure, so which we call it as an backend elements. So you could see the section name, we call it as an elements. So we are going to access the backend elements. So other way is if you are using the F12 button, so here at the left corner you could able to see some symbol like mouse, so which we call it as a selector or inspector. So with the help of the selector, so even you can find the backend mapping. So like you can just click on the selector, and then pose that you can drag your mouse on the like UI, and then if you click on OK, so it will be highlighting the particular piece of line. Okay, so technically we call this piece of line as a node. So generally the DOM structure, which means the HTML code, contains multiple node, okay, and each node is mapped to certain field in UI. So we are having the multiple nodes, and each node is mapped to the certain fields in the UI. So and then like we need to understand the structure of the node as well, because like pretty much this HTML structure contains the node multiple nodes, and we need to understand the structure of the node. So now let me right click and insert this particular username text box, and this is the node which is highlighting. I'm just right clicking and copying the entire node. Okay, so am I placing the node in the notepad, so that it is very easy for you guys to relate the structure of the node. So how this node is made up of in the sense, okay, so node is made up of tag and elements. So what is meant by tag in the sense? So like whatever which is mentioning first, we call it as a tag. So in this case, the input is mentioned as first, so we call it as an input tag. And apart from this, rest of the things we call it as an elements. Okay, so the node is made up of tag and elements, and in these elements contain multiple element. Okay, and how this element is made up of in the sense, it is made up of attribute and its value. So generally like we call this input as a tag, and rest of the things all together we call it as an elements, so which contain many element, so in which the first element we can call it as an class is equal to double quotes input r for void, and type is equal to email, so this is one element, and value is equal to null is an element, and name is equal to username is an element, and id is equal to username is an element, arial described by is equal to error is an element, style is equal to display block is an element, which means like we are having multiple element, and each element is made up of attribute and attribute value, which means we can call the class as an attribute, the type as an attribute, the value as an attribute, the name as an attribute, id as an attribute, and arial described by as an attribute, and style as an attribute. So whatever which is mentioned in the double quotes, we call it as an attribute value. So like here the email is an attribute value, so here null is an attribute value, the username is an attribute value. So generally the node is made up of tag and elements, but when you relate in the backend DOM structure, so the attributes will be highlighting in the different color, the tag will be highlighting in the different color. You could see the input is highlighting in a different color, the attribute called as a class, type, value, name, id, aerial descriptor is highlighting in the different color, and attribute value is highlighting in the different color. Even with the help of the color coding, like you can identify so what is a tag and what is an attribute and what is an attribute value, and the combination of attribute and attribute value we call it as an element. And how many elements this particular username text box contain in the sense we can say, so 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, so total it contains of 7 element. With the help of 7 element, so we are going to access the front UI, so which is nothing but we are going to utilize the property which is defined at the backend. So these are the things which have written by the developer, and we are going to access the backend property. In similar way, like if we need to see the backend coding of the password text box, so we can right click and we can inspect it up, so it will be highlighting the particular node. So what is the tag present here? So the tag we call it as an input tag, and rest of the things we call it as an elements, which is nothing but it contain multiple element, and the each element is made up of attribute and attribute value. So the attribute present here are called as an class attribute, type attribute, id attribute, name attribute, then aerial described by or aerial required on press key, so and so etc. So which means like we are having n number of node, and each node is made up of like attribute and attribute value. Okay, so which is nothing but it's made up of an elements. So in this case, right, the name of the tag is like called as a div, so it contains only one element, so we call it as an class is equal to w0, in which like class is an attribute and w0 links bt is like an attribute value. So generally if you open any of the web page, so for example let me just open the amazon.in or .com, in which like I'm trying to right click and inspect this search bar. Obviously like the backend DOM structure will be get open, so in which like we can able to see the appropriate node. So this is the node, so which is mapped for the search field. If I highlight my mouse over this particular node, so you could see in the front end it is highlighting in the different color. So whenever I place my mouse it is highlighting in the different color. So what is the tag present here? In the sense the tag here is like an input, and the attribute is like type, id, value, name, etc. And these we technically all together we call it as an backend elements, and we are going to access the backend elements, and with the help of the backend element like we are going to do the automation. Okay, so now for example let's take this node. So in this node like what is the name of the tag?
Input.
So input
Form ID.
Form.
form, so the,
Sorry, form.
the tag is going to be of in form. And what are the attributes available here?
Accept, cassette, action, class, method, name, role.
Role, etc. So which we call it as an like attribute, an attribute value in the sense like whatever which is mentioned in the double quotes we call it as an attribute value, and the combination of an attribute and attribute value we call it as an element. Okay. Okay, if you take this above node, so how many like elements are present in this particular node? Yeah, obviously like it is only one element. So element is nothing but it's a combination of attribute and attribute value, and the attribute is like id, and tag is like div. Okay, so generally like we need to know the structure of the node. So now how we get to know the structure of the node? In similar way like we need to know the structure of the HTML code as well, because like irrespective of any programming language, for example this Salesforce or Amazon may developed using the Java or Python or JavaScript, whatever the programming language they have developed, so the underlying layer will be always the HTML code. So this is the HTML code which is wrapped over the development code, and we are going to access this HTML code, and with the help of the HTML code, like we are going to do an automation. Okay, so this is the backend DOM structure. I'm just navigating my mouse to the top. So if you see the structure, okay, so initially, like the HTML structure always start with the tag called as an HTML. Okay, so it will start with the tag called as an HTML. So I have already told, like when something is mentioned inside the open and the close bracket, so we call it as a tag. So here the tag, it start with the tag called as an HTML. So the structure of the HTML code is like it always start with the HTML. And also I said, so whenever we are having the open tag, so it will have some close tag. So either the tag may close in the same line or in a different line. So let's say, so the HTML tag is like closing at the different line. So now inside this HTML, okay, so like we will be having two tag. So one we call it as an head tag and another is called as an body tag. So here you could see it starts with the HTML and it ends with the HTML, and inside the HTML we are having two tags. So one is the head tag and body tag. Okay, so we are having the head tag and it is terminating at the same line, and then like we are having another tag, so we call it as an body, and even it is like terminating at the same line. So now we will be having the associative nodes present inside the body tag. So if I expand this tag, so generally like you could see, so there is some arrow mark present before the node. So there are two types of arrow, like one we call it as an open and close arrow. So if it is like pointing towards right side, so we can say this tag is closed. Okay, so we can say the tag is closed. So in order to open the tag, like we need to click on the arrow. So whenever the tag is opened, so you could see like the direction of the arrow will be pointed to the bottom of the DOM structure. Okay, so if something is placing, if the arrow mark is placing to the right side, so we can say the tag is the closed or the node is like closed. So in order to open the node, like we need to click on the arrow mark. If it is points towards the bottom of the DOM structure, we can say it is an open. So the node is open, and you could see some yes, there will be a one line, so which means like it is starting at this point and it is terminating somewhere below. Okay, so here it is closing, and inside the body tag we are having n number of node. Okay, so inside this body node, like we are having n number of node. So when I hover my mouse over node by node, so you could see like if I just hover one by one, you could see it will be highlighting so something in the UI. So which means like it will be highlighting the username text words, password text words, etc. So each and every field will be highlighting. So which means like inside the body tag, okay, or inside the body tag, so we will be having multiple tags, and each tags will be mapped to the front end, so which is nothing but it will be mapped to the UI. So this is the structure of the HTML. So like we will be having the HTML tag, under which like we will be having head tag followed by the body tag, and inside the body tag like we will be having multiple tag, and each and every node is mapped to some field in the UI, and we are going to access the node which is present inside the body tag, and we are going to do the automation, which means like as it's having the multiple node, which means like each and every node will have some tag and elements, and with the help of an elements like we are going to do the automation. Okay, so till this point, does anyone have any doubts?
No.
Okay, so everyone is clear, right? Okay, let me just give the mic
Hmm?
adjust for others as well. So now let us step on to the next thing. To know how we are going to access this backend elements, in the sense like in a Selenium, like we are having the concept called as an locators. Okay, so with the help of the locators, like we are going to access the backend element. So there are close to 8 different types of locators, so which we call it as an ID, name, class name, path. Okay, so CSS selector, link text, partial link text, and the tag name. So there is something called as a locators in the Selenium, and with the help of the locators, like we are going to access the backend element. So in order to access the backend element, for example, like we are having many element. So like let's say like you are having the element called as an classes equal to input R4. If you are going to utilize this element in your coding, then you need to choose the appropriate locator. Okay, so like I will explain those in detail in the further session. And other thing is like, so with the help of the Selenium, we are going to inject the inputs as well. So inputs in the sense like here we may enter the username, we may enter the password, and we need to click the login button, etc. So what are the action we are doing? In the sense we are doing we are injecting the input, and we are doing the click operation, and sometimes we will be like getting the text present in the UI. So for example, like if I use the invalid username and password, if I click on the login, so the error message will be populating, and we need to extract the error message from the UI. So which means like we are going to extract the text. Okay, so these are the three key action like we are going to do with the help of the automation. So like what are the action you will be performing in the web pages? In the sense like we may inject some values, we may do the click operation, we may extract the text. So in order to inject the input, the Selenium is offering a method called as an sendKeys. Okay, so whenever like we are mentioning something in the like camel case, and at the end like if we have the open and close bracket, so we can call it as an method. So the first method like we are discussing today is called as an send keys. So what is the need of this send keys method? In the sense, so like to inject the input. In similar way, like if you need to do the click operation, so there is a method called as an click. Okay, so with the help of the click, like we are going with the help of the click method, like we are going to perform the click operation. If you need to extract the text from the UI, so then we are going to use the method called as an get text. So there is a method called as a get text. So make sure of the naming conversion. So even these methods will be available inside our project, because like these are the offerings provided by the Selenium. So even like the offering follows the naming conversion. So that is why I told, so like the naming conversion of the package name, class name, and the method name. So from the naming conversion, like you guys able to recognize so what is a class and what is a method and what is a package, which means the send keys, click, and text, so we call it as an methods. And with the help of these methods, like we are going to inject the input, we are going to do the click operation, and we are going to extract the text. Okay, so these are the things we are going to do with the help of the automation.